So our next speaker is Dusty Downey, who is a Community Naturalist and Conservation Ranching Program Lead for the Audubon Rockies Conservation Ranching Program. And so this is a program that brings profits because it garners a premium price for beef, but it also gives ranchers the opportunity to show excellent management practices. And I think that's going to be a theme we're going to show across every single one of our talks today. I'm going to let Dusty tell you about this program. And so take it away, Dusty.
Great, thank you. That was a great discussion, John. I appreciate that, and it's a really good lead into kind of what we're trying to do with our conservation ranching program, which ultimately comes down to exactly like John kind of put out there is to the key word here is diversity for us. Now Audubon as a conservation organization is looking through everything through the lens of birds. Kind of as the indicator species for everything on a particular property. And so we look at our birds and the health and the diversity of those birds, and we feel like that correlates pretty directly with the health of the soil, the health of the pollinators, the health of the insects, the health of the megafauna, and that those things all, directly correlate together. So I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my screen here, I think. All right, so hopefully that came up where everybody can see that. So again, I work for the National Audubon Society. In particular, I work for the regional office of Audubon Rockies, which basically works throughout Montana, Wyoming, Colorado, and Utah. I am the conservation ranching lead. I'm also a rancher up in Northeast Wyoming. So John and I actually aren't too far apart there from Wyoming, South Dakota. And all of the stuff that we're talking about today is really close to my heart because of the reason I was born and raised on the family ranch. The family ranch was bought by my granddad and grandma back in 1961. And so all of these issues are very close and important to me. And so working with Audubon, what we are trying to do, as I said, is look through everything through the lens of birds. And we do know that because of declines in grasslands, our bird populations are declining in historic numbers. And literally the habitat, we're losing millions of acres every year. We are losing that diversity that we feel is so important for the birds because of numerous problems and issues that are going on. But one of the things we also know is that these alarming declines are happening, and really the biggest chunk of area that we can have an impact would be on private lands. Over 75% of the grasslands in Wyoming, Colorado, Kansas, Utah, you go through those grasslands are actually private landholders. And so if we were going to do anything to try to stem the tide of this decline of grassland birds, we needed to work with the landowners who really control the management of those lands. And so we really took a hard look at what Audubon could do. There were organizations out there that did a really great job with easements and really great job with lots of other aspects of this. And Audubon, in our credit, decided to kind of take a leap of faith, and we decided we would start to create a market-based program. The marketplace program is our certification. It's a ranch certification. And our hope with this was that certification would garner a premium for producers who are in the program, who followed protocols and practices and all the things we'll talk about a little bit later. But then we would empower consumers to really be the ones who drive that the grassland management. We would incentivize those consumers to really be the ones that really take a look at these products and make decisions on what would ultimately benefit grassland birds and ultimately benefit the environment as a whole. And so that's kind of what we were looking at. We sat down with literally hundreds of ranchers over the course of a couple of years to try to figure out how we could do this, if it would be something that would be possible for producers. And if it was something that was of an interest to ranchers out there. We saw and traveled through, millions, literally millions of acres of beautiful native habitat as we went through Montana and Kansas and Wyoming and Colorado and South Dakota. And we knew that those were the areas that we needed to help preserve if we were going to preserve birds and if we were going to help preserve the pollinators and the other animals that are also kind of those indicator species on the land. And so as we drove through these ranches and saw the habitat and really talked to those conservationally minded producers, we found and just really decided that this could be a really great way to make a marriage between conservation and the agricultural community. And just as John said, I think, the most important thing of all of this really comes down to that diversity aspect. And we could tell the good ranch managers versus the ones who weren't necessarily quite as in tune with what they were trying to do. And that good ranch management included the grazing of cattle. We knew that cattle could be used as a management tool. We knew that some birds like to have very, very short vegetation. And if we could manage the cattle in a way to provide that habitat for those birds, we could really be doing them a benefit. We also knew that there were birds that liked much higher vegetation, shrubs, trees, and if we could use the cows as a management tool for those birds, we could also create habitat for lots of different species of birds. And so we were pretty excited to give this a try. We worked with producers from, like I said, across the range who are very, very conservationally minded to try to implement some of the protocols and practices and using some of the information that is out there from great people like John and the NRCS, the Game and Fish offices. There was a lot of information out there that maybe wasn't being distributed quite like it could have been. And so we put all that together to really come up with a great management plan on how each ranch could provide the most benefit to birds and everything that else is there. So we also knew that this habitat loss was connected to our food system. So the rancher's ability to be able to sell their animals as beef is an important part of the process. And it really is one of those things where we wanted consumers to make the choice. If they chose not to eat beef, that was fine. But if they did choose to eat beef, we wanted them to eat beef that was raised on an Audubon ranch that did work hard to try to provide that diversity. They try to provide, all of those things that would make a healthy ecosystem. So we knew the consumers were kind of the cornerstone of this as well. So this market-based approach, the management practices are outlined in our protocols and practices. And our hope was that the consumer would demand that, beef start coming from ranches that are conservationally minded. And so that was where Audubon jumped into it. We got in a little bit over our head in a few places. The market was not necessarily something that Audubon was all that didn't necessarily have all that much knowledge about, but in the last 6 years of the program, we've hired consultants. We've really worked with some amazing people that have helped us to kind of figure out that fine line between the market and the supply chain and just really making all of those connections within the Audubon ranching network. And that's really become what we feel is one of the most important aspects of this, is not only do we have producers who are conservationally minded in the program, who are constantly looking to improve, create diversity, create opportunities for birds, but we've also created this amazing network of Audubon certified ranches from Texas all the way to the Dakotas, to California, to Missouri, that really have the ability to share the wealth of knowledge that they have and really, really talk with one another about the opportunities that are out there within that supply chain. So we've got over 100 ranches that are currently in the program or enrolling in the program, and they're really creating a network that helps each other. So that's great to see. So our certification is a green seal. It's a promise to consumers that this meat was raised on bird-friendly land. It empowers the consumers to go out there and look for this seal, which is available in 22 states currently. and is really a way for consumers out there to feel good about choosing to eat meat if they do it. We know that if we're managing for birds, we're also managing for soils, we're managing for pollinators, we're managing the water, we're managing all aspects of a ranch, looking at it through the lens of those birds. So we have program standards for the certification. Some of the pillars are habitat management, forage and feeding. This is a fully grass-fed program, grass-finished program. Animal health and welfare is very important to us. And then, of course, environmental sustainability. And so we do say that, there are no use of neonics. That was something, John was kind of hitting on there earlier, and that is one of the parts of our protocols is that that is not something that is used. Confinement, we are not confining these animals. They're allowed to free range on native grasses. And I can go into a little bit more of the program standards with somebody. This is obviously fairly complicated. There's a fairly decent document that's on our website, but I'd be happy to answer questions later on about a little bit more about the standards. But what I will say is one of the most important parts of this entire this certification is that we develop habitat management plans for each ranch. We know that a ranch 20 miles from me is going to be very different than where I'm at here on the northeast side of Keyhole Lake. I've got Ponderosa Pine, I'm at the base of the Black Hills. If you go even 20 minutes to the west, there is much more sagebrush country out there. And so we knew that our habitat management plans needed to be tailored at the ranch level. And so we create these plans with the producer. They're not a contract, but they're a plan that takes into account everything from grazing management to where we can have some opportunities to maybe provide or increase productivity for the producer. We look at places that we can increase habitat for birds. We look at the cycles of disturbance and recovery. We use, as John was talking about there earlier, regenerative grazing. We don't necessarily subscribe to one version of grazing, though. I will put that out there. We feel that each ranch is a little bit different. If we tried to do very, very heavy amp grazing or what they call just very, very, very heavy grazing in my area, we would also destroy sagebrush. And so we take all of those factors into account to create a grazing plan that is best suited to that ranch and that is going to be able to be something that's adopted or already being done by a producer. We do think it's important to create that patchiness, again, going back to the discussion of diversity among the landscape, so that we can create as much opportunity as possible for the largest number of different species of birds that we can possibly do. And we use the cows as that management tool. I'm sure you've all heard, but with the bison and the ungulates of history, that's what happened. That's how, between that and the fire regimes, that's how management happened. Well, now those things need to be kind of taken into account as we create this habitat management plan. So the benefits for the ranchers, our hope is that it adds value to the beef, and we do have good data that says that it does do that. As we talked about earlier, that transition to a new grazing approach, we've got a lot of folks with a lot of knowledge on how to make that work, really the best ways to do it, those really digestible chunks that you can do from year to year to be able to start the process. We connect to state and federal cost share programs. Because of our program, we do have higher benefits when folks are applying to things like NRCS programs or again, USDA, Game and Fish. Because of being the Audubon, the National Audubon Society, those ranches in our program do get a little bit of priority for that. And then we help connect the finishers, the cow-calf operators, really develop that supply chain. We've got the marketing out there. And one of the most important things that we hear a lot of times through the ranching community is that, as a rancher, we don't tell our story necessarily all that well about how important our land is to the environment. And so, Audubon is a large voice, and it can amplify the message of a producer of really how important and how much conservation takes place on a working cattle ranch. And so Audubon is happy to be able to be that voice and to really tell the story of ranching in a whole new way, in a conservationally minded way. We do, to be able to back up the claims that we do a lot of ecological monitoring on every ranch, bird, territory mapping. We have something that is called the Bird Friendliness Index, and we can go into that a little bit more. But it's basically a comparison of a certified ranch to other areas, maybe other ranches, maybe other territories around there, and you know, we can show that the number of species and the diversity, even taking into account things like weather and storms and all of that, we can show that those certified ranches oftentimes do have much better diversity than some of the areas around there. So the science is extremely important. We are very rigorous with our science to make sure that everything that we say can be backed up with that science. Otherwise, the National Audubon Society wouldn't let us run this program the way we do. And so we really have rigorous science that backs up all of our claims. So we also help with that market development. Our brand partners, there are lots of them out there. Some online, nationally, some regionally, and some locally. And so we've tried to hit kind of all of those different opportunities for producers, everything from the small 500-acre ranch all the way up to a 100,000-acre ranch, and made sure that we have made the certification available to all producers. This is where we're at. Right now, 93 participating ranches. This number is a little bit low. We recently just went over 2.5 million acres enrolled in the program. And we're working on that brand expansion. And so looking at things like the Whole Foods and some of the different opportunities that are out there. So this is where we're at. This is kind of what it looks like across the Great Plains, all the way over to California, Missouri. We are not east of Missouri as of yet, just for capacity, but we would like to see that move that way in the next couple of years. So. The future, 3.5 million acres by 22, 40 million consumers. 40 million consumers. We're looking at a lot of different opportunities for the producers in terms of carbon offset monies. We are doing a lot of soil health monitoring right now. Everything from meter depth, profiles to just some age tests that we're doing on the ranches to try to increase our knowledge and our ability to talk about the soil health and looking at building soil health on pasture land and on range land, which obviously is very different than building soil health on crop land. And so we're looking at ways that we can help do that and really increase that as well. And so that is it. That is me. If anybody has any questions, we'll talk a little bit later on, but there's also the website you can go to there, rockies.audubon.org/ranching, or you can email me at ddowney@audubon.org. So that, stop sharing and I'll pass it back over.